Hello everyone, this is Tejashwini Gowda. In today's class, let's try to understand about the residential status and the scope of total income, and we are going to cover the residential status. This is going to be a detailed revision for that matter. Okay. Now, the first point, the section, first of all, before understanding about the residential status, first let's understand why is it necessary. Residential status is necessary because the income which you're earning in India will be considered as Indian income, right? Basic prima facie point being Indian income for that matter. If I'm speaking about Indian income, it is going to be taxable to you depending on your residential status. If you're a resident, it will be taxable. If you're non-resident, it will be taxable in a different way. If you're resident but ordinary resident, resident but not ordinary resident, it is taxable in a different ways. So, Section 6, that is in this chapter, we are going to determine about the residential status for that matter. Section 6 speaks about the residential status wherein the tax paid by the SSC, particularly it definitely 200% depends on its residential status. If the same income, if that fellow is being called as non-resident, it will be taxable in a different terms. And for individuals and HUF, we have basically three categories. One is ROR, RNOR and NR. Resident and ordinary resident, resident but not ordinary resident, and non-residents for that matter. And for other than individuals and HF, remember as of now, we have only two category classification, that is resident and non-resident classification. We don't have much classification over here. Okay. So first of all, when I'm trying to understand about individuals and HF residential status classification, understand one thing. As of now, we are looking into only individuals residential status. I'm not looking into HF as of now. HF will understand it later after we complete the residential status of individuals. Okay. First of all, basic conditions. You have two basic conditions that you need to satisfy. The first basic condition being you have been in India during the PY. PY means the relevant PY for our exam is PY 23-24. Everyone PY 23-24 and we all know AY 24-25. PY 23-24 and AY 24-25. And if I'm speaking about the PY, in the PY which is relevant for our exam is 23-24 and for a period of how much? For a period of 182 days or more. For a period of how much? 182 days or more. He has been in India during the previous year for the total period of 122 days or more, that is in the relevant PY. He has stayed in India. He is in India for a period of 182 days or okay. Exactly 182 days is covered. Yes. If he has stayed for 181 days, the first condition not satisfied. If you had stayed for 183 days, yes, the first condition satisfied. If you had stayed exactly 182 days, yes, the first condition is satisfied. Because remember one thing, it is 182 days or more is what we provided. 182 days or he has been in India during the last four PY. People, if I'm speaking about last four PY, last four PY, it means immediately preceding the previous year. Which is the previous year which is relevant for us? Previous year relevant is 23-24. Immediately preceding the previous year means it starts with PY 22-23. Immediately preceding this is what I'm writing. Immediately preceding last 4 years is what they're asking for. PY 22-23, 21-22, next 20-21, next 19-20. All these 4 years, last 4 years is what I'm speaking about in this book. Immediately preceding the previous year means previous year is 23-24. Immediately preceding is this for a total period of how much? For a total period of 365 days or more. For a total period of how much? 365 days or more and has been in India for at least 60 days in the relevant PY. And for at least how much? For at least 60 days in the relevant PY. If I'm speaking about the relevant PY over here, the relevant PY is going to be 23-24. This 23-24, you should have stayed at least how many days? At least you should have stayed 60 days over here. At least 60 days. What do I mean? Very simple. In order for you to satisfy whether to tell a person as a resident, you need to satisfy any one basic condition only. It is not necessary that you need to satisfy two conditions and all. Any one condition satisfied, you will be called as a resident for that matter. Clear? You will be called as a resident. That is, if the individual satisfies any one of the conditions mentioned above, you will be determined as resident. You are very well fine. He has been in India during the last PY for 182 days or more. And in the second question, look over here, people. It is or clause, not and clause. Means any one condition satisfied, you will be treated as a resident. Now, this second additional basic condition has two sub conditions over here. That is, you need to be present for 365 days or more in the last 4 PY, and you should also be present for at least 60 days in the last PY. You should also be present for at least 60 days over here also. Clear? You should also be present for at least 60 days here as well. Both the conditions satisfied, very well, fine. You will be called as second condition, second basic condition satisfied. Then, okay. Now, see, when you're considering for the purpose of your calculation of number of days, always remember you're going to consider the number of days he has stayed. That is date of departure and the date of arrival. Both days are considered for the purpose of determination of residential status. Next, remember citizenship has nothing to do with your residential status. You might be citizen of US, but still you can be resident of India if you are satisfying these conditions for that matter. Clear? If you are satisfying these conditions, then it is going to be considered. Clear? Now, with regarding to your point, see, you're going to look into both the additional conditions, sorry, both the basic conditions, either this or this. First, you're going to check this one 182 days or more. If not satisfied, then you're going to look into this. Correct? You're going to look into this and then you're going to look into this. This or this. Any one condition satisfied, very well, fine. Any one both the conditions not satisfied, remember you will be treated as non-resident. Okay? Now, there are exceptions to the case where you're going to look into only one basic condition, that is this basic condition only. You're not going to look into this basic conditions, which is the exception is that if who leaves India during the relevant PY as a member of the crew for that matter, or for the purpose of employment outside India. If that fellow is leaving for the purpose of employment outside India or being a crew member of an Indian ship, then it is going to be considered as what? It is going to be considered as your, that is you 182 days. You're just going to look into one basic condition. Stayed for 182 days or more, very well, fine. If not stayed for 182 days or more, you're not going to check into next basic condition. Directly, you're going to determine them as non-resident. Clear? Directly, the determination will be non-resident. Now, there is another point. There is another point that you need to consider over here is here. Indian citizen, a person of Indian origin. Okay. See over here, he can be an Indian citizen. Citizenship has nothing to do with the residential status. He might be an Indian citizen or a person of an Indian origin. Who is a person of Indian origin? Very simple. His parents or his grandparents are born in India. That is called as person of Indian origin. Now, he being outside India comes on a visit to India during the relevant PY. He is outside India, is staying outside India and is coming just for a visit, just to look over India and go. Or he might be having some property to look into that, or he might be having some friends or relatives look into that. He has. You can call this fellow. You can call this fellow as a California fellow. That fellow coming in, that is being outside India on a visit. That is outside India first of all. This California fellow, let's consider, is an Indian citizen. He is born in India. He went settled over there. He came, is staying outside India, comes for a visit in India during the relevant PY for that matter. Now, if that California fellows total income other than the foreign source income is exceeding 15 lakh rupees during the PY which is relevant for us. Relevant PY is 23-24. In that year, if the foreign source other than the foreign source income is exceeding 15 lakh for that matter, then you're going to look into the residential status, you're going to determine the residential status of this California fellow in my example as this. That is, if he has stayed for 182 days or more in the relevant PY, or 4 years in the last PY, as we have seen in the similar point, for 365 days or more, and he has stayed not for 60 days, he has stayed for at least 120 days. He has stayed for at least how many? 120 days. Stayed for at least 120 days, and in the last 4 PY stayed for 365 or more, only then the second basic condition will be satisfied. Clear? This clause or this provision or this way of determining the residential status is applicable only in the second category, whatever we are speaking about. Clear? It is applicable only in the second category. Then, now, always remember there's a person called as deemed resident. Okay. A deemed resident is an Indian citizen having total income more than 15 lakh, that is exceeding 15 lakh, other than the foreign source income. If he is not taxed in any other country, then he will be considered as resident for the tax purpose in India. He is considered as a resident for the tax purpose in India only if his income other than the foreign source income is exceeding 15 lakh rupees in the relevant PY. Only for the tax purpose, we are going to determine that fellow as a deemed resident. Always remember, deemed resident will directly be considered as someone called as RNOR. He will be called as what? RNOR. He will not be called as ROR. That is, in order, after you looking into the point of resident, that is resident and non-resident, now you are going to determine, after classifying the individuals as resident, you are going to classify that a fellow as whether he is an ROR or RNOR. How are you going to determine this fellow is ROR or RNOR? Is very, very simple. You are going to look into the additional condition. Remember, both the additional condition in this case is satisfied. That fellow is called as ROR. If it's not satisfied both the condition, that fellow is called as RNOR. Clear? Both conditions satisfied, which we are seeing for the ROR. Both the condition not satisfied. Any one condition not satisfied, he will be immediately be treated as RNOR. Clear? If such individuals has been resident in India in any 2 out of last 10 PY during the preceding relevant previous year, that means to state very simple. Last 10 PY is what I have written, right? Last 10 PY means preceding, immediately preceding the previous year. Previous year relevant 23, 24. Immediately preceding that, it starts with 22, 23, and you have to go backwards to 10 years. Out of 10 years, if you're resident in any 2 years, out of this 10, resident in any 2 years, it means to state, can I say, you have to check the residential status of whether that fellow is resident or non-resident in all the individual 10 years for that matter in order to satisfy this condition. Remember this point. Then, next condition is if such individual during the last 7 preceding previous year, that is starting from 22 23, going backwards from this year for 7 years, if he has stayed for 730 days or more, very well, great, then he is considered, then he will be considered as the both the conditions satisfied. This condition, both the conditions satisfied is treated as ROR. Any one condition not satisfied is treated as RNOR. Clear? Now we have seen about the additional condition over here. No, there are certain exceptions wherein without even treating, need not check the additional condition at all. Without even checking the additional condition, you're directly going to determine the person as RNOR in two situations. One is the deemed resident situation, which we already know. The second situation is that we took the example of that California fellow. No, California fellow, where his income is exceeding, that is Indian citizen or a person of Indian origin, where his income is exceeding 15 lakh during the PY, if that fellow has stayed for a period of 120 days or more, but less than 182 days. It is 120 days or more, but less than 182 days. Then in that case, if he has stayed for these many days, that is, he has not stayed beyond 182, he is not stayed below 120. If he's coming in the mid for that matter, then in that case, we are directly going to determine him as RNOR without even checking the additional condition. Without even checking the additional condition, I'm directly going to determine him as RNOR, resident but not ordinary resident. Clear? This is about the residential status of individuals. Now let's move forward to the simple point, residential status of HUF. Now, if I'm stating about residential status of HUF for that matter, see, remember one thing. If the control and the management of the affairs is situated wholly or partly in India, wholly or even partly in India, the HUF is going to be considered as resident. If it is wholly outside India, the HUF is going to be considered as non-resident. Next, the next point being, see, once you determine the HUF as a resident and non-resident, if you determine the HUF as resident, then you need to look into the residential status of Karta in order to determine the HUF as ROR or RNOR. How do you determine? Very simple. You are going to check or you are going to determine additional conditions for the Karta. If Karta is ROR, HUF is also ROR. If Karta is RNOR, HUF is also RNOR. Clear? Now, the residential status of the firm and AOP and BOI is similar to that. That is, if the control and the management of the affairs is situated wholly or partly in India, resident wholly outside India, non-resident. Remember, unlike Karta, unlike HUF, you are not going to determine the residential status of partner. It's not relevant for the purpose of your firm AOP BOI testing. Partners residential status doesn't determine the residential status of the firm. Firm has its independent residential status. Now, when it comes to residential status of the company, see, always remember every Indian company and the company which has the place of effective management is always considered as resident. Place of effective management means where the key decisions, commercial decisions are taken in India. More about this place of effective management and all, it is there in the CA final syllabus. So much is relevant for us as of now. That is, key management and the commercial decisions are held in India for that matter, then it is going to be considered as resident. Local authorities and artificial juridical person, the residential status determination is similar to that of your firm also. If control, management and affairs is located it's wholly or partly in India, then it is resident. Wholly outside India, it is considered as non-resident. So, in the next concept, we will cover the further points. Thank you.